Hey YouTube, it's gvloanguy. It's February 5th, 2012, and I just finished watching the response from Danny over at Starscream to my video response to his radio show. Anyway, while I was watching his video, I was just compelled to respond again. So while I was watching it, I was just observing these interesting, fascinating information and the stuff that he compiles here, which I enjoy, all of it. But it made me want to think about something that was, it made me want to think about all the way back to the beginning in the origins. And in fact, I think I've heard Danny before talk about tracing things all the way back to their origin. So I did a quick search for the word tree in the Bible, and I did it in the American Standard Version just simply because it's a little bit easier reading than the King James, but it's not a whole lot different. Anyway, the thought that came to my mind was, as I was watching this video, is there are two trees presented in Genesis in the Garden of Eden. And there's very interesting verses and references to them. So I'm going to just read a couple of them here. Genesis 1:11. And God said, let the earth put forth grass, herb yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit after their kind, wherein is the seed thereof, and on the earth, and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass and trees, every tree for food. This is Genesis 1:29, and God said, behold, I have given you every herb yielding seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for food. And some of you will know that I've quoted this verse in a different series of videos that I've made. Anyway, so this tree is, or rather the references here to trees for food. And let's see, I wanted to get to, I guess it's Genesis 2:16. And Jehovah God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. And then we go on to Genesis 3:1, right here, 3:1 and 2. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which Jehovah God had made. And he said unto the woman, yea, hath God said, ye shall not eat of any tree of the garden? You see, he comes to the woman with a question. Didn't God say you could eat from any tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, of the fruit of the trees of the garden we may eat, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. Well, eventually the serpent talks her into it. And in Genesis 3:6, we read, and when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, she was talking about the tree of knowledge, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat. And let's see, you know the rest of the story. Basically, their eyes were opened. Let's see, I think that's in here. This is another search I did on the tree of life. And the tree of life is specifically referenced in the beginning of the Bible in Genesis, and again throughout the Bible, and then at the end in Revelation, the tree of life. So this is a great, one of the mysteries of the Bible is the two trees that were in the garden. And so when I was, once again, when I was looking at this, I couldn't help but think that this tree, all of this information seems to be accurate and interesting and fascinating. But it strikes me that it is also all from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And the contrast is, with that, is the tree of life. So I don't deny that any of those things are accurate and even interesting and fascinating. But what I wonder about is, are they fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or are they fruit from the tree of life? So let me just quickly go through these couple verses here. Genesis 2:9, and out of the ground made Jehovah God to grow every tree and pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Interesting. So this was a tree made by Jehovah God out of the ground, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life. And unto Adam he said, this is Genesis 3:17, and unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree, of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake. In toil shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Now what this tells me is that it was God's original intention for man to live off the tree of life, absent toil, absent the cursed ground. We all know, any of us that have tried to grow things in the ground recognize how difficult it is to produce edible food, but how easy it is, for weeds to come in and take over. Anyway, let's go on here. Genesis 3:22, and Jehovah God said, behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life, and eat and live forever, so he drove the man out. You see, God didn't want us to have the knowledge of good and evil and be stuck in that condition forever. So man was blocked from access to the tree of life from that point on. So he drove the man out, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden the cherubim and the flame of a sword, which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life, meaning to block the way of the tree of life. But as we work our way through the Bible, the reference to the tree of life runs through Proverbs and then in Revelation. And he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh, to him I will give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. And then again here in Revelation 22, in the midst of the street thereof, and on this side of the river, and on that, was the tree of life, bearing 12 manner of fruits, yielding its fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. I don't know what to make of all of that. It's just that somehow when I was listening to Danny and paying attention to all the information, it just made me think about the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. And this is where I think the difference is. I think that as I look into all the different things that are in the Hermetic wisdom and all of the teachings and along those lines, Gnosticism, as I look into those things, I'm wondering what the day-to-day practice is. How does that affect me in my daily life? How does that affect the way I feel about myself and the way I feel about God and the way I feel about other human beings? I always come back to that, even when I'm reading the Bible and I'm observing, studying the scriptures, all those things. So I'm wondering if the Bible, in God's sovereignty, if the Bible isn't a indication of how we can practice, how we can take these principles and practice them in a Christ-like way, I guess would be the best way to put that. But that's not what salvation's all about, don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying that all of the knowledge that comes from the teachings, that comes from all the things that you're exposing in your videos, we have to deal with those as Christians. We have to deal with Horus and all of those things. And I plan to deal with Horus and how and why and what that means. I don't know what it means, but I'm going to look into it. And I believe as Christians we shouldn't be afraid of anything, because isn't it that we're after the truth? Aren't we really seeking the truth? I've been seeking the truth for almost 50 years myself, since I was roughly 17 or 18, right in there. Not quite 50 years, but coming up on it. Anyway, I'm going to try to keep this to 15 minutes, so I've got to keep it brief. But it strikes me that there is a huge difference between the knowledge and the wisdom that can be obtained through the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Both good and evil are in contrast with life on the other side. And it's clear that God has given us all of the plant life on this planet to be food and medicine. And so the tree of life is in that same plant life realm. It's not like an animal sacrifice, although there is references to the animal sacrifice, the lamb, shedding of the blood, and all of that. But from the standpoint of knowledge or information or taking in food for spiritual growth, food for life, I just can't help but think that the tree of life is a better place to be eating rather than the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because as the verse pointed out, it makes you like God. And isn't that what the original sin of the fallen angel Lucifer was? That he wanted to become like God and wanted to ascend and to become like God. It reminds me of the Tower of Babel, the coiling serpent wrapping up. It reminds me of Babel. It's all about knowledge and reaching God by way of knowledge. So anyway, I've come to the end of the time. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I've presented some interesting stuff for you to consider. You sure have presented interesting things for me to consider. So thank you for that.